weekly water outlook recorded on January 20th, 2012. Well, last week it was actually a pretty interesting week over the eastern part of the U.S. and the southeast U.S. in particular. You can see the area of yellow, which represents 2 inches of rain or more, and the red, which represents 5 inches of rain or more. So it's very significant over the parts of the southeast U.S., parts of the Tennessee River Valley, into the mid-Atlantic region. You might remember I talked about an oscillation called the MJO, and that helped indirectly bring in some Pacific moisture, and it was a prolonged rain and snow event lasting several days. Now, if you weren't in that area, the story was definitely dry. Anywhere over the central and western U.S. experienced very dry conditions. As a matter of fact, look how much of the nation received no rain whatsoever last week. So I think we had sort of extremes of both significant rainfall over parts of the east and southeast, and a very big area of below normal rainfall over the rest of the nation. Matter of fact, if you look at percent of normal precipitation here, in red is 25% of normal or less, and look how much area is covered by that dry condition. I don't remember when this much area has been covered for quite some time. The area of blue and purple is above normal. Blue is 1.5 to anything to 3 times normal precipitation for the week. So here's an update for snow. Snow fell both in the area of rain over the southeast U.S. as well as the northern plains. I think the snow in the northern plains into the Great Lakes region, that's your typical snow that you get this year. Note that it's on the lee side. This is your lake effect snow of the lakes. This is light amount snow in purple. That's sort of typical this time of year. The snow we had in Alabama and parts of Tennessee, Mississippi, that was in the cold air, and here's another band in Arkansas. And then in the higher elevations of the Appalachians, we really enhanced the snow in that region. The green is very significant amounts of snow as we got some of that mid and upper level Pacific moisture and low level Gulf moisture feeding into higher elevations. So the extent of snow across the nation is indicated in this graphic. As we started the year, you might remember that we had about 60% of the nation covered in snow. Now it's 30%. So we've had a pretty significant decrease. And I'm going to be covering this a lot more thoroughly, both in my weekly outlooks and my newsletter as we get into February and March and April. But right now, there's not a whole lot of snow on the ground, and the water equivalents aren't all that significant. But the rain last week did produce quite a bit of flooding over the southeast U.S. into the Ohio Valley. You can see some of the spots currently in flooding and expected to continue in flood this week. I'd call this a typical flood event for this time of year. There was some within bank to minor flooding. There was some very scattered moderate flooding. Maybe a point or two got into major flooding. But this is typical for this time of year. And as we get grounds wetter and wetter and base flows of rivers higher and higher, the potential for flooding will increase late this winter into the spring. I did want to mention that there was some drought improvement due to this rain. This is the area core of drought over the southeast U.S., and I put the area in dashed purple, the heaviest rain, and that's where there will be some improvement. I think the parts of the Carolinas, most likely much of the area of drought will be alleviated in those regions, and the area in red in Georgia and Alabama within the purple line, some improvement, but the drought will still persist. But the area of drought, the real core persistent area of drought in south central Georgia, really didn't get that much rain, and areas of drought will persist unabated in that region. So this week it's back to the Arctic oscillation. Wanted to point out that what we've seen so far this winter is here's a dip, it rises back up to almost neutral, and then another dip. And what you can see here as we get through the middle of the month into the latter part of January, a strong negative oscillation and then maybe getting back into neutral. And this is your classic negative Arctic oscillation temperature pattern. Blue is below normal temperatures this week, and you can see the real area of cold air, the push of cold air over Minnesota pushes down into the Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, mid-Atlantic states, and northeast U.S., and that's your classic Arctic oscillation. I'm going to show you here in just a minute the jet stream pattern with this, and what you have is your vortex of very cold air in Canada, and here's a very strong jet stream rotating around this low. There's not going to be real strong pockets of energy or areas of energy within this jet stream. They're going to be very weak. So within this jet stream, there'll be light precipitation in the form of snow more than rain even. but it's not going to be all that significant. It's not going to be all that strong. South of this core of the jet stream, in this region down here, very little energy at all. It's going to be south of the area of energy, and that's going to be very quiet. In fact, here's a precipitation outlook, not just this week, but into next week. And pretty much the entire nation is going to see below normal rainfall or snow. We have a very extensive area of dry conditions. Once again, another week over the central and western U.S. And over the eastern third of the U.S., there will be precipitation, snow to the north, rain to the south. But this is pretty modest. I think there could be some significant snow over the northern and northeast tier states. Everywhere else is going to be more modest. And over the southeast U.S., maybe a quarter inch or a half inch. That's not going to be enough rain to really turn the rivers around a whole lot. In a few cases, it might slow the recessions, but for the most part, it's just going to not have a whole lot of impact on rivers. So here's the specific forecast for rainfall this week. Pacific Northwest, some enhanced rainfall. The more significant snow will be right here in the Great Lakes regions, especially lake effect snow. And perhaps in the eastern U.S. some significant snow. And then everywhere else, either very quiet, no rain whatsoever over the central U.S. or the southwest U.S., and just very modest rain over the southeast U.S. So from soil moisture changes throughout the week, the general color here is a light brown, and that's general decreases in soil moisture. But I think for the most part, one way or the other, there are not going to be any real significant either improvements or decreases in soil moisture. So the takeaway points for this week's briefing looks like generally a quiet week, significantly quieter over parts of the nation this week than last week. There will be some light precipitation in the form of rain or snow over the eastern U.S., but the big story from an aerial coverage will be widespread dry conditions over the central U.S. and the west. Thank you for listening to this week's briefing. I will be updating this next week about the same time. Thank you.